Welcome back.
Welcome.
Very happy to be here. Hi, Asaf. How's it going?
Everything's okay. I hope that everything's terrific with our students. I'm already seeing that we have a bunch of friends already connected from a bunch of places, as always, and it's really, really great to see. I'm seeing friends from Los Angeles, from Pennsylvania, from Arizona, Tennessee, from Spain, Hawaii, Finland, from Holland, from South Carolina, Orlando, Canada, from London, from Costa Rica, from New Jersey, Scotland I saw, it's Colombia, a bunch more places, Winnipeg in Canada as well. It's beautiful to see.
So as usual, we have these dots all around, and we'll spend just like 1 second on seeing where we are and what we are. So right now we have people from all around the world. And the difference between what you're going to be doing in the next, say, hour and a half and what you've been doing throughout the day is very simple. Throughout the day you've been focusing probably on your corporeal day-to-day things you need to take care of, your family, your job, your friends, and so on. Now, over the next, say, hour and a half, and hopefully whatever we do here will kind of stick with you and become part of you, we're going to focus on something else. We're going to focus on taking each one of these. We heard a lot of locations, right? A lot of people from a lot of places. So each one of those people is a dot, is a point, is a spark of a desire for spirituality. And every spark is a small spark because it's only a dot, has no volume, no area. But if we start thinking of connecting these dots together, then we're doing something really great. We're starting to restructure the collective soul, the soul of Adam Harishon. So we haven't really learnt about it in depth yet. We've touched upon it. We've spoken about the collective soul. Actually, last lesson as well, that's how we concluded. And even if you just start thinking about this idea, if you start getting into that mindset that we're here, we're building this mutual soul, this mutual desire, and we're doing it together, and we're all here at the same time, we're all being with this intention, that already is a great preparation for the lesson. So let's take this thought, let's continue the preparation process, which we're sure that by now, by lesson number 5, you've already, 5? Are we 5 or 6?
We are lessons 5. That's
lesson
correct.
5.
Yes.
Right. So by lesson 5, we're sure that you've already understood that preparation is actually part of the lesson because it basically determines how much you'll get out of the lesson. So if you haven't already shut down all the unnecessary windows, your Gmail, your Yahoo, any of these instant messages and chats that you have open maybe sometimes, make sure everything is closed. Let's focus just on this, just on these points, just on the collective soul. And let's watch a 1-minute clip just to make sure we're really all tuned into the same frequency. So
the wisdom of Kabbalah, as opposed to most other methods, doesn't use any actions, any ceremonies, any conditions, limitations in this world, anything. It doesn't depend on this world in anything. It turns to the point in a person. And it doesn't care about the body. It doesn't care about the body. All the methods, you have to believe, you have to perform physical actions. Here, you don't. Nothing. Only connection between everyone. To try to get that and to draw the reforming light. That's it. Meaning, all the creatures connected within their desire, not physically. You don't have to gather someplace, you don't have to hug, you don't have to do anything. All these things are only external and there's no need in them. Internally we have to be connected with the Creator. Israel, meaning Israel, the light and the Creator are one, that's it.
Right.
Okay.
So Israel, the Torah, and the Creator are one. Israel, what's Israel? Those who have a desire. Israel in Hebrew means Yashar El. This is an important concept. In Kabbalah, Israel isn't a nation, but isn't a physical nation, but it's a nation of desires. And this is Israel in Hebrew, and what it means literally is Yashar El, meaning it's those who have a desire directly. This is direct, and this is to the upper force, to the Creator. So that clip concluded with Israel, those that have a desire for the Creator. The Torah, meaning the light that reforms. Israel, Oraita, Kuchabrichu Chadu. So Israel, the Torah, and the Creator are one. All right, so let's get into that, into today's lesson. And let's start.
And we'll actually understand more about this notion in Kabbalah, where some concepts are not exactly the way we're used to interpreting them in Kabbalah.
Right, especially today. We'll delve into that.
Exactly.
So just a quick reminder, please use the chat. We love it when you do, when you ask questions, because A, we see that you're engaged and involved, and B, we realize that we're not talking to a camera and a screen, but to actual people real people who are there. So your questions help us have that kind of feeling that there are actual people behind the screens that are now connected and watching. Plus, we know what is clear and what is unclear. So please use the chat, ask questions, participate in the lesson. All right. So before we get into today's lesson, which is talking about the language of roots and branches, let's have a quick reminder of what we've already done. So we started off, and now this is kind of a pop quiz for you to answer yourself in your mind to see if you've been with us. So in lesson number 1, we spoke about what is Kabbalah. What is the wisdom of Kabbalah? So do you know what the wisdom of Kabbalah is? Do you know what the word Kabbalah in Hebrew means? Kabbalah means to receive. And the wisdom of Kabbalah is the wisdom that basically teaches you how to receive. That's the wisdom of Kabbalah. So what is Kabbalah? We started off with that. Kabbalah. And then we said that you can't receive directly, but you receive in a way that the pleasure is infinite. We want to reach infinite pleasure, and Kabbalah teaches you exactly how to do that. It's the wisdom of how to receive. Then in the next lessons, we spoke about how this can be done. And how can this be done? Well, the simple, short answer is by changing your intention. Remember? We spoke about a black box with openings, 5 of them, which are actually senses. And this black box is a program which is called, it has a hardware called what? Called the will to receive. That's what it's called, and that cannot be changed. In addition to that, it has a software called with the intention in order to receive. And we said that the only thing that needs to be changed in order to be able to receive infinitely is the way we use that intention. Meaning this has to change from in order to receive to an intention that we called in order to bestow. Right? So it's clear what needs to be done. That was basically answering the question, how can we attain that spiritual world? How can we change our desires? How can we go up to the world of causes and not consequences? So then we answered that. So now it's clear, right? So it's clear how to attain spirituality. Change your intention. But as we know, during the study, questions are answered, new questions rise. So after we know how to change our intention, that we need to change our intention, the question arises, how do we do that? We're locked in with our intention now. Everything we do is that pure calculation of self-interest. And I think that was actually an exercise we gave at the end of last lesson, right? We said, try and feel how every action that you do, every movement that you make is actually driven by that software, by that intention, a will to receive in order to receive. And it's an interesting exercise because there is some kind of natural resistance to it. It's like you might be thinking, no, I'm not like that. I don't do everything in order to receive. Sometimes I give. I'm a good person, right? It's natural. Everyone feels that. Everyone thinks that. It's a calculation of the will to receive, to feel good about itself. And that's fine. Because the will to receive is not good nor bad. It's not praised nor condemned. Why? Because it can't be changed. So what can be changed? The desire. Now today, we're going to start talking in a series of 2 lessons, and today is the first of these 2 lessons. How can we change the desire? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. How can we change that intention of ours? How can we change the software? We want to upgrade, right? We agree with you. You should upgrade. The current software is already obsolete. We see it's leading to a chaotic world, and maybe also on the personal level, and we do want to upgrade the software. So let's get into it, and let's find out how. So we're going to start with some reading. And actually, it's going to be some interesting reading because we're going to open some Kabbalistic text. Because today we're talking about the language of Kabbalah, the language of roots and branches, which is the language that Kabbalah is written in. So let's get a taste of what language Kabbalah is written in. So let's have a look at the text on the slide, and let's do a little bit of reading. All right, so let's see if this is clear, because we want to learn Kabbalah. This is from the study of the 10 Sfirot. So it says there, Igulim are regarded as gar. In Sefirot of Igulim, the outer is more important. Conversely, in Sfirot de Yosher, the inner is more important. 2 kinds of receptions in the Kelim. A, through their pnimiut. B, through their his oniut. Through the chitzoniut. Bchina Daled cannot appear unless the previous 3 bchinot cause it to appear. All right, we got the idea. Basically, this text is, some of the words here are clear, because they're in English. We know the outer is more important. We can interpret that as whatever's outer is more important. But some words here are completely unclear. What's a sphira? What's igulim? If you know Hebrew, then you might think you understand what igulim is, because an igul in Hebrew means a circle. So the text might sound to an extent clear and to an extent unclear. And that's what the study of the 10 Sfirot, that's the language that it's written in. So the question is, can a Kabbalah student, a beginner or even an advanced student, can one truly understand what's written there? Let's read something else. Let's move on to the next slide and have a look at some more text. Okay, this is from an article called Peace in the World by Baal Sulam. And he says like this: everything in reality, good and bad, and even the most harmful in the world, has a right to exist and should not be eradicated from the world and destroyed. We must only mend and reform it because any observation of the work of creation is enough to teach us about the greatness and perfection of its operator and creator. All right, so this is a completely different style text. This text seems very clear to us. It's written in English. There are no weird words here like igulim, gar, chitzoniut, and so on. So this is also a language that Baal Sulam uses in one of his articles. And let's have a look at one last slide. And let's see what it says here. And this is from the book of Zohar, which you've probably heard of. So the book of Zohar says this: when a man's way pleases the Lord, he makes even his enemies be at peace with him. There are 2 angels for a person, emissaries from above to unite with him, one to the right and one to the left. And they testify to a person, and they are present in everything he does. Their names are the good inclination and the evil inclination. All right, so this is actually, some might say, well, yeah, it's pretty clear. It says here, some description about how a person has these two emissaries, and it's pretty clear what it says. And some might say, okay, but what are these exactly? Are they desires? Are they physical things? There's a lot of questions here that you can ask. The bottom line is that it seems like the language that Kabbalists write in can be a bit confusing, because sometimes it's clear that it's unclear. There's no doubt about it. But sometimes it seems that it's clear, and sometimes not so much. So the question is, what language do Kabbalists write in, and why would they even give us texts that we don't know how to understand? What is the use of it? Is there any benefit to that? And can we use it if we don't understand that? So that was kind of an introduction to today's lesson. And feel free to, if you don't have the answer to that, then that's fine, because we're going to start delving into that this lesson. And to start off with, let's start off with a law called the law of roots and branches, and that will basically get us to start to answer this. So before we get into this, let's read some text from Baal HaSulam that he explains about the language Kabbalists write in. So let's have a look at the next slide after that. Okay. So he says like this. We're reading from Kabbalah for the Student on page 23, article The Essence of the Wisdom of Kabbalah. So he says, Baal HaSulam says, many believe that all the words, and the names in the Wisdom of Kabbalah are a kind of abstract names. This is so because it deals with godliness and spirituality, which are above time and space, where even our imagination has no hold. For this reason, they have decided that surely these matters speak only of abstract names, or even more sublime and exalted than abstract names, as they are completely and from the outset devoid of elements that are imagined. Next slide. But that is not the case. On the contrary, Kabbalah uses only names and affiliations that are concrete and real. It is an unbending rule for all Kabbalists that anything we do not attain, we do not define by a name and a word. Okay, so there were two things already. Baal HaSulam started off with saying that the words, I'm just reading it from here, you have the text in front of you, you don't need to open the slide. Many believe that all the words and names in Kabbalah are kind of abstract names. So it seems that the words we read, these words, Igulim and Sfirot and so on, it seems like they are abstract and no one can understand them. And this is so because it deals with godliness and spirituality, which makes sense that maybe it's not clear because godliness and spirituality speak on something on a different level than this world, which makes sense. Where our imagination has no hold, true. For this reason, they've decided, meaning people who come across these texts that we did, that these matters speak only of abstract names. Meaning that whatever we're reading is something abstract, it's not really something that a person can grasp or can attain, but it's talking about concepts that are abstract, or even more sublime and exalted than abstract names, that they are completely and from the outset devoid of elements that are imagined. Meaning that all these words can't ever be understood, they're talking about some abstract or even beyond that words, and that's how it is because they're talking about sublime and spiritual matters. So that's what one might think, and actually many do. Many people think that Kabbalistic text is supposed to just be read without understanding, without wanting to understand, and that's it. It just needs to be read because there is some kind of, maybe some remedy about it. Okay, so that is not what Baal HaSulam says. We read on the next passage that we read, so he says, that's not the case. That on the contrary, Kabbalah uses only names and affiliations that are concrete and real. It is an unbending rule for all Kabbalists that anything we do not attain, we do not define by a name and a word. So basically, Baal HaSulam is saying something very, very powerful here. He's saying that every single one of these words, whether it's Igulim, or Gar, or Atzilut, or even things that seem to us that are understood, maybe Kli. We know a Kli means a vessel, so that might seem clear. So every single one of these words, whether they seem clear or not, Baal HaSulam says that they come, what were his exact words? Anything we do not attain, we do not define by a name or word. Meaning, if this word was written, then the Kabbalist who wrote it has attained this. Now, this leads to another question. So what is attainment? Is attainment just understanding? Is attainment knowing? So to answer that, let's try and think of different levels of comprehension of something. So let's try to think, for example, of a cat. All right, so any kid knows what a cat is, right? You know, a kid can point to a cat, say meow, meow, and that's some level of knowledge. So a kid knows what a cat is. Now, if you go someone who knows a little bit more about cats, and or even a lot more, you go to a cat researcher or a vet or someone that really knows everything about the cat, its biology and even its psychology, then you can say that that person really has a deep understanding of the cat. He knows how it behaves, he knows its behavior patterns, he knows why, and so on. But Kabbalah says that attainment, meaning each one of these words that was written, was not from knowing these words, like a researcher or a vet knows a cat, its biology, its psychology. No. Attainment is even beyond that. It is the ultimate level of understanding.
To be a cat.
So in comparison to the cat example, it is not knowing what a cat is, it's not understanding a cat to its fullest extent and knowing its biology and psychology, but it's actually becoming the cat.
Becoming a cat. Nice. I like it.
Right, so that would be the comparison for attainment. It's becoming that thing that it talks about. So when a Kabbalist writes that word igulim, that word gar, that word atzilut, or any of these words, even those that seem clear and those that don't seem clear, they're writing it from the highest level of understanding, of comprehension that you can imagine. They're not talking about their cat, they're becoming the cat. As an allegory, of course. Kabbalists don't become cats. They become the spiritual levels they attain. All right, so that was just a few words about attainment. And it's important to understand what attainment is, because we need to understand where these words are coming from. Where are they writing these words from? So let's just take a quick 1-minute break to watch a clip that explains what this attainment is. So
when a person achieves spirituality, does he achieve it in a way of sfirot? Suppose if now I'm suddenly in attainment, I start understanding Zohar and tests as if that's what's supposed to happen? When you will come into attainment, then first of all, you get the feeling. It's everything about feeling, because we're talking about the desire. Inside the desire, you'll feel a certain phenomenon. And you will suddenly know how to call that specific phenomenon. What is it? Suddenly you'll know that it's, it means this and it means that, and I remember that it said this and that about this, or we've learned it one way or another. You'll suddenly recall all that has to do with that attainment you have achieved. Instantaneously, all at once, both the word as to how to call it, also the state itself, where does it say about it, from what you've learned, from what you know. You will know everything about that very phenomena that you will attain, that you will feel, but first of all comes the feeling.
Great.
All right.
Maybe to give another example, just to give another kind of more on a human level kind of what attainment is, and this one kind of will help put us into the frame of mind. When a person experiences something, then it's very different from what someone who just learns about something, right? And when we grow up, we actually become full of experiences that we can't even explain to someone who haven't grown up to the same kind of age, So for instance, if you have a little daughter and she knows that she has a mother, right? And she understands what a mother is. She even understands what a mother needs to do in order to take care of a baby. Let's say that a little kid sees her mother taking care of a little baby, but the gap between that and actually becoming a mother is so big, not just in terms of age and years, but it's so big psychologically, mentally, emotionally, that it cannot be bridged by any kind of explanation, any kind of word. that it simply requires the growth of the little kid to become an actual woman who gave birth to a baby who is hers, and then she feels what it means to be a mother to a baby. And so that is pretty much the difference, if you want to put it in perspective, between understanding something and knowing something and attaining something. Okay,
Right, so let's conclude with what Baal Salam says about attainment. So let's open up the text again. And we're reading from Kabbalah for the Students, still the same article, The Essence of the Wisdom of Kabbalah, page 23. And this is what Baal Salam says. Here you must know that the word attainment implies the ultimate degree of understanding. It derives from the phrase, that thy hand shall reach. That means that before something becomes utterly lucid, as though gripped in one's hand, Kabbalists do not consider it attained, but understood, comprehended, and so on. So the bottom line of this is that every single one of these words that we read, that a Kabbalist writes from, he only writes from what he attains and nothing less than that. There is no abstract in Kabbalah. There is no philosophy. There is no talking about things the way I imagine them and think they might be and writing it down. No, every single Kabbalistic word, this entire book, and all the rest of the authentic Kabbalistic books that we study from in Bnei Baruch, including the study of the Ten Sfirot, the book of Zohar, the writings of Baal Sulam, the writings of Rabash, which is the son and successor of Baal Sulam, all of these texts are written from spiritual attainment. Okay, so let's move on and understand why. Because there is a question here. If all of these books are written from spiritual attainment, and all of these words have some kind of spiritual essence, let's call it, then what can we do with these books? How can we use these books? If we can at all. Actually, I think there was a question just about that, right? I saw a question about that from Pater from Colombia.
Yeah, why do we...
We'll just read the question.
Well, yeah, Pardo asked, is it the language of roots and branches? Is that language also present in the forewords and the introductions to the Wisdom of Kabbalah? As beginners in this path, why are we learning so early about this language if we still don't need it, since we're not reading the Zohar yet or other books?
Perfect question. And that is the exact same question that should be leading us at this point of the lesson. Why do we need these books? As you said, as Pardo said, we don't understand what it says here yet, right? If you don't attain. So why do we encourage you to buy the Kabbalah for the Student? Why do we bring it every lesson? Why do we read from it? Let's wait, let's reach attainment, and then we can start getting the text and start reading what Kabbalists wrote, right? It's a valid question. So let's leave it open. Let's not answer that question now, because that question is actually the question for this entire lesson. Okay? So hopefully by the end of it, Padro, was it? Pardo, sorry. You'll get an answer. All right. So let's go further into understanding the mechanism of how the Kabbalists write and from where they write to us. So in order to explain that, let's take a look at this. And now we're going to learn the language of roots and branches. That will be our title now. The language of roots. I'm at the end of the screen already. So okay, so is that cut off for you guys as well? Yes, it is. Of roots and branches. All right, so this is what we're at now. So the Kabbalists do write from a certain language, and this language is called roots and branches. What does that mean? In Kabbalah, there is a concept that everything in this world is actually a branch, and this branch has a root in the spiritual world. So let's take, for example, even something physical that we all know. Let's take a tree or a house. or anything that you would like. So this is something in this world, right? But every single thing in this world is already a result of something in the spiritual world. Meaning the house that we see in corporeality is already a result, a consequence of something that exists in the spiritual world. So this would be a house in spirituality. And this would be a tree in spirituality. So this would be the roots. These are the roots, and these are the branches. Now, a few things that are important to understand. This entire structure is one way, meaning what we're seeing here, these branches, they're consequences, you can say. They're a result, not the other way around. Let's see what Baal Shalom says about this. Let's keep reading, and we'll go with Baal Shalom about this. So we're reading from Kabbalah for the Student on page 25, the essence of the wisdom. Let's take a look. And he says the following. He says, each lower world is an imprint of the world above it. Hence, all the forms in the higher worlds are meticulously copied in both quantity and quality to the lower world. So he's basically describing what we just described. Every single thing in this world, he says, is meticulously copied in quantity and quality to the lower world. So whatever there is in spirituality, there is some kind of copy of it in this world. And then he keeps going, and he says, let's move on to the next slide. Thus, there is not an element of reality or an occurrence of reality in a lower world that you will not find its likeliness in the world above it, as identical as two drops in a pond, and they are called root and branch. That means that the item in the lower world is deemed a branch of its pattern found in the higher world, being the root of the lower element, as this is where that item in the lower world was imprinted and made to be. So he basically describes the fact that every single thing in this world is an imprint. Now you may ask, okay, but is it the exact same? Is a house in this world, is a tree in this world, is that the exact same as it is in the spiritual world? So that's a good question. Let's maybe start answering that by just reminding the fact that the spiritual world is built of layers, of worlds, of degrees, altogether 125. And these 125 degrees are actually filters, they're levels of concealment. So this tree, this physical being we have here, and that's what Baal Shalom says, that they appear in every one of the spiritual worlds. We have a tree on this level, and this level, and this level, and this level, and this level. And it's the same being, it's the same thing, but it takes on this replication or this branch in every one of these levels, and it's filtered out. It has a certain level of concealment. And in our world is the world of concealment, actually. So in comparison to spirituality, we're all walking around blindfolded. This is basically our world in comparison to spirituality. We're not even touching the true essence of reality from this world, only a drop of it, only a spark. That's the beginning of this universe. That's what the Big Bang is, the end of the concealment of the spiritual with what was created that formed this world. So what we have here in this world is just a spark of the true reality. And everything we see in this world, this object, is basically a remaining spark of what there is in spirituality. Right? So if there are any questions about this concept, about roots and branches?
No, we do actually.
All right, so let's go.
Let's take Leslie first from Whitman, Arizona. She says, how can a root in spirituality cause the mess we live in? That's a really correct question, because, looking at our world, it's such a messy place. But what if that mess that you live in is the same order that you see in spirituality? What if there is no difference? What if there's just one reality? You see, it seems like also from the drawing, like we're looking at one reality in one place and another reality in another place, but actually not. We're looking at one whole reality. There is no spirituality, corporeality from reality's perspective. There's just one existence. The question is, as Gilad started to say before, what level of concealment is over our eyes, our senses? So when we are really disconnected from the spiritual reality, it means that we're disconnected from the correct perception of reality. That all that we see is the lowest, most crude level of perception. And on that level, what we have is a mess. That's how it seems like. But that situation where you see an embroidery. Those embroideries where, on the one hand, you see a picture. If you turn it around, it's a mess of threads. They look just like a mess. And if you turn it the other way around, then it's a beautiful picture. And so, in a very similar way, that's how the connection between roots and branches work. So what may seem as a mess on one side of the picture, if you go into the other side, may seem like a beautiful order. So it all depends on the observer.
All right. We have another question there?
Yeah, but guys, feel free to ask about this more.
Maybe we'll take Jeremy's question.
We have Jeremy asking, so do each of us have a root in the spiritual world?
It's a great question, Jeremy. And this actually brings us back to the beginning of the lesson. Remember how we started preparing for the lesson? We said that each and every one of us is a point, is a desire. And actually what I drew here is your root, Jeremy. That's your root. And what do I mean? I mean that I already drew an image, an illustration of the collective soul. So let's say this is the collective soul up here. And down here we would have this world. And then we have Jeremy. But Jeremy, in comparison to spirituality, what you are is a dot. That's it. Because your physical body, that changes, right? A person lives, they die, and then what is eternal is not their physical body, but what's eternal is that point, that spark of spiritual that they have in them, that each person has in them. Where does that spark come from? It comes from the very thought of creation. Right? The Creator was a will to bestow. He wanted to give, so he created something opposite from him, a will to receive. And then there was some interactions between the light and the clear, 4 phases. We're not going to get into that now. You're doing that with William and Dave. So, Jeremy, your root is basically up here. And your root, interestingly, is on the one hand your unique root, which is only for you, Jeremy. And each one of you have a unique root, have a unique soul, because each one of us resembles the Creator, and the Creator is one and unique. That's why every single spark is unique as well. And the way to discover this uniqueness, interestingly, the way to really fulfill one's potential is by reconstructing the system from where the person's root is. So people that are in this world, and I was amazed when I started studying the Wisdom of Kabbalah, and when I finally had this understanding, that every person wants to maximize their potential, right? Wants to reach their fullest, wants to know what they can do in this world, what their special qualities are that they can really make a mark and make a difference. And each person wants to find that kind of uniqueness of theirs. And it's true. And that desire of a person is also true because it comes from the fact that we're all similar to the Creator, which is also one and unique. And when I came to the wisdom of Kabbalah, I finally understood that discovering this uniqueness, maximizing the fullest potential of myself, is by reconstructing that place where I really came from. And I guarantee you that if you focus your efforts on that, on building that collective soul, on creating equivalence of form with the upper force, which in other words is reaching balance with the force of nature, then I guarantee you will find your place. You will find where you can make your mark in the world, how you can change, how you can really be that special addition to the entire system. And each person is special. We'll learn about that a little more in the lesson of freedom of choice, that every quality a person has is unique and should remain and should not be erased. And the way to realize how to use these qualities correctly is exactly through that. So, Jeremy, I hope you're building and trying to find the root of your soul, and not just Jeremy, all of us. Mm-hmm. And let's continue.
So let's look at more questions.
Mm-hmm.
So Vanna from London asked earlier, actually, whether the names that Kabbalists use pre-exist, whether they exist before the attainment of the concept, or they are assigned later to the concepts that the Kabbalists attain. And this is actually a very correct kind of question, because in a way, when Kabbalists discover the spiritual roots, they're actually discovering the words themselves. You're right about that. How can that be? Well, because the words that we're familiar with, the words that we're using to describe things in our world, they're actually connected. You saw these connections in the drawing. Maybe we can even look at it again.
Which
There's
one?
just the drawing. One? No, just to look at it. Yeah, exactly. So if a Kabbalist uses a certain word, then the word is coming from this world, but it actually relates to the root in the upper world. So what you have is a language that's built on what exists in reality, but it's describing the connections between the levels of the different levels of reality. And so that's actually right. You're actually correct. A Kabbalist doesn't invent a word and just comes up with it and says, it'll be interesting to call Sfirat, the Sfirat Malchut, the world of Atzilut, let's call it like that. Let's go with the world of Bria. It sounds kind of neat, kind of nice. It's not like a creative session in a marketing team. Rather, it's an attainment that a certain level or a certain element of reality needs to be called a certain way, because that's the way in which it connects to our world of words. So,
right. So basically, Kabbalists, what they do is they attain the connection between what is in the spiritual and what is in the corporeal. So when a Kabbalist writes a word, like we said before, Gar or Atzilut or Malchut or so on, and they're giving it a name not from this world. Even if though sometimes the name seems like it's from this world. If it doesn't, then it's much easier, because if we're talking about Atzilut, there's no interpretation for what Atzilut means, so there's no confusion here. But if we're talking about etz, a tree, then there can be confusion. Sure, I know what a tree is. I have one in my backyard. No. A Kabbalist, when he writes about a tree, he's not talking about a tree in my backyard. He's talking about a tree from up here, from the spiritual world, which is a spiritual object, basically. Let's read and see what Baal Shalom says about that. So we're continuing on Kabbalah for the student. Moving on to the next slide. So he says like this. Kabbalists have found an annotated vocabulary sufficient to create an excellent spoken language. It enables them to converse with one another of the dealings in the spiritual roots in the upper worlds by merely mentioning the tangible branch in this world that is well defined to our corporeal senses. Let's keep going. The listeners understand the upper root to which this corporeal branch points because it is related to it, being its imprint. So let's just pause here for a sec, but basically Baal Sulam is saying here that the language the Kabbalists write in, this language of roots and branches, is actually a way to communicate between each other. He says here, to converse with one another of the dealings, meaning between the Kabbalists, in the spiritual roots in the upper worlds, by mentioning the tangible branch in this world. So by mentioning this tangible branch in this world, they're actually referring to this up here, right? That's basically what they're referring to. So it really is a kind of a code language that Kabbalists wrote and that Kabbalists can understand. So, Pardo, your question still stands. What do we need this for? Why are we learning about this if we can't really use it, right? If Kabbalists wrote in this language we don't understand, we're learning even more than that they wrote from their spiritual attainment, and they're talking about something from spirituality, and they wrote it for other Kabbalists who also attain that. So who can understand what a tree is that he writes about, Baal Sulam? A Kabbalist that has attained that same level from where the first Kabbalist wrote about. So it's like this secret code language between Kabbalists. So why are we learning about this now? In addition for the fact that it's interesting to understand how Kabbalists communicate, how is this relevant for our spiritual development? Right? Because we don't want to just learn about it, we want to actually attain it. So let's keep reading. So it says the following. Thus, all the beings of the tangible creation and their instances have become to them like well-defined words and names indicating the high spiritual roots. Like we said, a code language. Although there cannot be a verbal expression in their spiritual place, as it is above any imagination, they have earned the right to be expressed by utterances through their branches arranged before our senses here in the tangible world. All right. Let's continue to the next slide as well. This is the nature of the spoken language among Kabbalists, by which they convey their spiritual attainment from person to person, from generation to generation, both by word of mouth and in writing. They fully understand one another with all the required accuracy needed for negotiating in research of the wisdom. Okay, so that's very nice, and Baal Sulam is explaining here how they wrote it, who they wrote it for, right? He says that in this world there are no words to describe the spiritual, so they use words from up here. Now, the reason why words from up here seem familiar to us is because of the law of root and branch, right? So because of the law of root and branch, then every word here from the spiritual world, it has its result in this one-way street. And because it has this result, then these words sound familiar to us, but really you're talking about something spiritual. So he deepens the question. He deepens the explanation, and he deepens the question again. What is this relevant for us? We'll get to that as well. So that's basically the language of roots and branches, and Kabbalists who write this, they write it from their own attainment, and this is a one-way street. So if you want to understand what a house in spirituality is, you cannot learn from a house in this world, meaning you cannot say, okay, I know what a house is here, so I can learn about that from the spiritual world. No. But in order to understand what a house is, you need to rise to its spiritual root, and only there you'll be able to understand what it is, not the other way around. That's basically the concepts we know from Kabbalah from the very first lesson, that any change you want to make to your life, to your fate, to the system, to the world, cannot be made directly in this world. Why? Because this is a world of consequences. If you want to change what you see on the screen, if you want to change the program, you have to go to the code behind it. You have to change the code, and then you'll see a change in the result, right? If you want to change this embroidery, then you have to go behind the scenes and change the connections. You have to go to the root, to the cause of the issue. And this is basically following that same concept. Do we have any other questions?
We do, actually. Sasha from Serbia asked me earlier, are we guided by the light constantly? And I think it was in relation to how everything stems from the upper world, from that upper level of perception, and all the branches that we see here are actually results. And so in relation to that, I think the question was, are we guided by the light constantly? So yeah, basically that's a simple answer. All the time, at every situation, being aware of it or not, then the connection between roots and branches is at play, it's at work, it's working. And so we also are guided by that connection, again, whether we are conscious of that or not. So yes.
I want to maybe add to that something kind of small, that yes, we're guided, like Asaf said, and when a person reaches not spirituality, but when he reaches this understanding that there is something spiritual, there is a spiritual world, then that is the first time that a person has freedom of choice. We're not going to open that up now. You might be disagreeing with me at this point, saying, I have choice, I can do whatever I want, I can do this and this and that. Fine, we'll get to that in the next lessons, I think pretty soon, I think in 2 weeks from now. But basically, when a person gets to the spiritual path, then he's entering an advanced, say, guidance of the light. So the entire world, the whole of humanity is guided by the light. There is nothing else. The light is the developing force of the system. However, it's developing it in general. And when a person comes to the wisdom of Kabbalah, when he's brought to the wisdom of Kabbalah, it's as if he's getting into this individual guidance of the light. And then there are two simple options. There is the path of Torah, as Baal Salam calls it, which is the path of light. And that is when a person takes these guiding, I don't know how to call it, these guiding principles. He takes these hints, let's say, and he follows them. And by following, it only means he makes an effort to follow them and no more than that. Because a person only has an effort. He cannot do beyond that. And then he's in the path of Torah, in the path of the light. Meaning he's always one step ahead of the program that's leading all of humanity to develop. And then that's pleasant, nice, good, positive path. And if a person does not follow that guidance, then he's still advancing. He has to advance because there's a purpose of creation and this plan has to be executed. Then he goes in the path of suffering or darkness. And this basically means that instead of out of choice taking these steps and staying ahead of the path of advancement, he needs to be pushed from behind, because everyone at the end will reach the end of correction, all of humanity. But how much suffering does a person need to go to until he has these questions, until he starts to understand how to truly, what truly is the meaning of life, right? So this is the path of suffering or the path of darkness, where a person is pushed. So yes, we are guided by the light, and when you come to the state of the wisdom of Kabbalah, then this becomes even more evident and more important, because then it's not only that the entire system, the world, is being pushed to advancement, but already you have your point of freedom of choice, which is the choice between, for the first time in your not life, but in your entire existence of this spark, which is infinite from the beginning of creation. For 14 billion years, you have now, for the first time, reached a point of choice, because you're choosing between the force of bestowal and the force of reception. And before that, any other choice you make is always between what? Receiving and receiving. Do I want this or do I want that? That's no choice here because you're choosing between reception and reception. So there's no two forces. If you want choice, you have to have two things to choose from. If you're choosing blue or blue, then what's the freedom of choice? Right? All right, so let's get back maybe to topic. That kind of took us aside, but it's a very important concept in the study of the wisdom of Kabbalah. And if you follow that concept, it can save you a lot of suffering. Let's keep going.
So we have actually a bunch of questions on the topic. So let's start from Kyle from LA, actually. Can one inherit the ability to understand this language? Well, if you mean to inherit as in something that goes by inheritance, then absolutely no, you can't inherit this language, but you can definitely attain it. And that's what we're here for. And to give a short answer on this one, your point in the heart is the beginning of the attainment of spirituality. It needs to develop. You need to learn how to cultivate it using the advice of Kabbalists, and hopefully taking the path of the highway, the fast route, the path of light. Call it however you want, but coming there fast. And then actually attaining spirituality. Then it means that you attain the connection to at least one degree, the minimal degree, the connection between the concealment that we're experiencing in this world, where we have words to describe our reality, and the inner level of experience of the revelation of the upper world. Where you don't have words, but when you have the connection between these two levels, then that's the first level of understanding the language. You see what I'm saying? So the first level of attaining spirituality is equal to understanding, truly understanding, attaining the language of the branches. Until then, we can learn how to interpret the language here and there. We can understand that we don't understand it. But when we actually attain the first level, the first degree of spirituality, then we attain the first degree of connection between the roots and the branches, and therefore we understand what the Kabbalists are talking about. This is also why it's called a revelation. So I hope these connections are now kind of made in your frame of reference to this, to the drawing before, and to the roots and branches and the language, and you understand that it's really not an intellectual thing. And we obviously, like Gilad said earlier, and this already answers another question from Vanna, are the roots and branches one-to-one relationships? The connection is always from above downwards, meaning the spiritual level dictates what happens in the lower level. The higher level always dictates what happens in the lower level. And so when we are only on the lower level of attainment, only on the level of this world, we can't understand spirituality. We just can't. Even if we think we understand the words, that's actually the biggest mistake, to try to relate to what the Kabbalists wrote as if we already understand it. That's actually what it means to in the Kabbalistic interpretation, to materialize and corporealize the Torah, the writings of the Kabbalists. By the way, we mentioned Torah a couple of times in this lesson, so maybe let's just, to be absolutely clear about it, Torah also is a word that needs to be interpreted correctly. Torah comes from the word light, or, Torah, or, comes from the word or, which means light, revelation. And it also comes from the word hora'ah, which means instruction, which refers to the method of how to attain the light. And so that's where it comes from. It doesn't refer to some book that people think about as holy just because it is a certain book. There are no holy objects in Kabbalah. They just don't exist. There is nothing that's holy in this world. Holy is also another word that needs to be interpreted. It simply means a degree that is beyond our world that is separated. Kadosh, holy in Hebrew, comes from the word nivdal. This is what it means. It means distinguished, separated from our experience, our reality, our perception, our world. And so this was to answer Vanna and Kyle as well. Michael Martinez from San Antonio asked, was Adam a Kabbalist? And if he was, and Abraham was a Kabbalist, then who were there between the two, and was Adam really considered the first Kabbalist? So short answer, yeah. In the sources of Kabbalah, Adam is referred to as the first person on earth with a point in the heart who achieved an actual full revelation of the upper force, meaning developed his point in the heart and came to a point where he begins to see the connection between the roots and the branches and actually discover that the upper world. And so, by the way, this is also why he wrote a certain book, the first one to write his impressions, his revelations in a book. And all the major Kabbalists, they actually, a lot of them left books. It doesn't mean that there were no other Kabbalists between Adam and Abraham. There were many other Kabbalists throughout history, but these are actually like milestone Kabbalists, because you see, just like in science, what happens is that a scientist discovers something, and then they write it down, and then another scientist, if they study that field deeply and they want to advance that field, then they have to replicate the experiments first of all, and then they have to conduct their own experiments and develop the science even more and add more detail and so forth. And this is very similar to how the method of Kabbalah is being developed throughout the generations among Kabbalists, and how the language has evolved as a result of the development of the research as well, and to a point where you have Baal Salam that tells you in the text that Gilad read earlier that they have an entire vocabulary now to use in the research of the wisdom. So you see how it develops just like the scientific method develops in that respect. The problem is that if you don't have the tools to research, astrophysics, for instance, then you don't understand astrophysics, right? Same with Kabbalah. It's the same thing in that respect. But you do. You have a point in the heart, and it's the beginning. That's why you have a certain feeling of what these Kabbalists are talking about, and you kind of feel what's going on in the lessons, even when you don't fully capture what it's about. When you kind of feel that what the texts are talking about, even if you don't fully capture what it is. That just means you need to continue developing, continue growing that point in the heart. Maybe, how about taking this one?
Let's maybe continue with a quick summary, just to
Okay.
kind of have some closure of what we've done so far, and then we'll keep taking some questions. I see we have some more questions going on there, so
we have
we'll get
more
them.
questions.
Okay.
A couple more.
A couple more, great. So basically, what have we learned until now? We learned basically two simple things. Let's kind of recap it. So we learned, one, that anything a Kabbalist writes to us, one, Kabbalists write from what do they write? From attainment. Simple concept. There is no abstract names. There is nothing airy-fairy. There is no philosophy. But every single thing a Kabbalist writes is written for spiritual attainment. And the second thing that we learned is that they write according to the you know what, even before that, we learned that there is a law of roots and branches. Roots and branches. Which basically means that everything in this world is a consequence of the spiritual world, right? So everything we see here, it all has a spiritual root to it. And then number 3 is that Kabbalists write in a language of roots and branches. Right, so every single word they write in, it's a code language. They write from Kabbalists to Kabbalists. They only speak about the spiritual worlds. And they've used words from this world because every word here points to something in the spiritual. So we still haven't answered your question, Pardo. And to tell you the truth, we're not going to answer it today, only next lesson. But maybe we'll just give you kind of a hint. So the question is, just to remind it, in short, like kind of a summary of the question, it was, why do we need these texts? Why are we learning about this now? What's the use of taking this entire book and learning from it? And yes, we still encourage you to buy this book because it does have great use, even though it is written from Kabbalist to Kabbalist, and even though it's talking about the spiritual world, and even though you don't understand a single word in it right now, but you can still already use it now. And the hint is, of why you can use it, the hint goes like this. You have, say, a microwave. Now, to build a microwave and to design it and to engineer it, you need to study a lot. You need to become a scientist. You need to know about electronic engineering and about physics and about a lot of things, about material and a whole variety of things. It's probably not even one person, it's a bunch of people. And in order to build a microwave, they need to know a whole spectrum of things. Right. But to use a microwave, what do you need to do? Push a button. Right? So this is similar here. To write, to understand, to reach the level of the Kabbalah, that Kabbalists write from, you need to reach spiritual attainment, you need to rise to the same level they wrote to. But in order to use it, you just need to push the button. And what's that button you're pushing? It's very simple. It's your intention while you're reading. And that intention of yours, and this is basically an intro for the next lesson, that intention of yours does something very special. So you're here, you're reading from a book, from a Kabbalah book, of course, an authentic Kabbalah book. If you're not sure what an authentic Kabbalah book is, then you can just make sure to take books from our library because we only use authentic Kabbalah books. So when a person reads from the Kabbalah book with the intention to reach what the Kabbalists have written, which for a person who hasn't attained it yet, that's considered infinity and sof, no end, spirituality, then by that a person draws upon themselves a very special force. The force called light. We're not going to go deep into that now. This is already an intro for the next lesson. But we had to leave you with something so you don't close the books and throw them aside and say, what do we need them for? So yes, they have great use now. To use a microwave, you don't need to study electronic engineering. You can press the button and you can do the same here. To use these books, you don't yet have to be a Kabbalist. You don't yet have to be in spiritual attainment. You can press the button is your intention, you can use it, and it already, even if you feel it, even if you don't, it doesn't matter, it's lifting you, it's raising you, it's bringing you closer to what the Kabbalist, to the level the Kabbalist wrote from. All right, so I hope that also gave you a kind of a quick summary of the lesson and created some interest for the next lesson, and that it gave you kind of an inspiration to now look at the text a bit differently. All right, do we have some more questions?
We do. There was a question from Marcel from Calgary, which really is, I think the bottom line question that every student watching this lesson is asking, which is, how can we get to the root? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, so this is this, right? This is what we just spoke about. Mm-hmm. This is the root. This is us.
Okay. Well, again, without giving away too much to an entire topic that will open up in the next lesson about how that mechanism actually works. The way to reach the root is only through your point in the heart. That's first of all. There's not going to be anything at all that you're going to do with your with your hands and legs and speech and customs, behaviors, anything on the outside, anything external that's going to actually be the way to spirituality. You can arrange external behaviors and environments as assistance to your spiritual progress, to your spiritual advancement, just like what you're doing right now. You put you tune in to edu.kabbalah.info, you go into the lesson, you get a book, you put it in front of you. Sure, these are actions that build your environment for spiritual progress. But the actual attainment of the roots happens when your point in the heart develops to a point where it's a new sensory organ. Right now, it needs development. It is beginning to sense something, but it just needs further development. What we're going to get into next lesson is going to really answer it, because it's going to tell you how that language of roots and branches that Kabbalists wrote, how that can act as the mechanism to grow your point in the heart. To use another metaphor, instead of growth, like a body that grows, or a sense that grows. You can also think about it like an elevator. That's because Gilad says button, and I liked buttons. So I remember as a kid, I liked also the idea that you hit a button and it takes you up. It's really cool. There's a way to use these books just like that. Another example to give you, to provoke your curiosity a little bit more for the next lesson. You probably watched the Never-Ending Story, was it called? I guess.
Yep.
So you know that situation where from the film, right, when the kid reads the book, and basically the book becomes the film, right? So the book becomes alive. I'm not going to share any more at this point.
Maybe for those who haven't seen the Never-Ending Story, then a more current example is Harry Potter. Right, in Harry Potter, the books, they become they're moving their lives.
Yeah, but I think that example really is the Never-Ending Story is just a more right example.
Right,
and
no,
also
but it's possible
Rob
that a younger audience
used the same example once, I remember, and I really related to that because it's true. It's an older.
Right.
How old is that?
Never-Ending Story?
Wow.
I don't know. I watched it when I was a kid, so
I did
at least 30 years old.
Yeah, but so that's nice to kind of see that. In any case, it will become reading Kabbalistic texts once you harness the mechanism. You understand how it works and how you're supposed to relate to it. That's the most important thing, because we're sitting like here, we're wearing jackets, we're teaching you all kinds of concepts, we're using a drawing board. It's very, very reminiscent of a university kind of setup. Right, and so we think that Kabbalah is also something that where we need to do an intellectual type of effort, an intellectual type of exertion, and it's really, really far from the kind of effort that we learn gradually to make as we interact with the text. It becomes a much more emotional, internal, personal, intimate kind of experience, where you're working with the text on a level that is so far from just filling up our brain cells. That's good too, but so we'll get to that. So there's a lot to expect. I think we built up the next lesson pretty nicely at this point. This is just the very last remark. We'll just mention that the next lesson you won't be able to download it. We're gonna take it off
Yeah, it's not going to be available for
That's it.
download.
You're only going to be able to watch it live. No, we're kidding.
Yeah,
Honestly.
we are kidding.
We are kidding.
Yes, you will be. No worries. But come live.
So,
Okay, do we have any more questions?
Sasha from Serbia says the book comes to life. I know that feeling exactly. Interesting. Okay, people are relating to what's being said.
There was
It's
a question
very
there
good.
before I want to relate to as well.
You have a specific question?
Yeah, just scroll down a little bit.
All right.
More.
So
There was a question.
maybe about what we mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah, there was also one about, you've probably seen that annoying banner on our website.
Yeah, Tiffany was
New
asking
York.
this.
Yeah,
I came across
let's get Tiffany's question.
yeah, maybe we'll clarify that. I came across a pay what you wish banner on the EC website. I'm curious to know, why did you choose that model? Isn't it fair for everyone to pay the same price? Can you shed light on that?
Yes, actually, I want to add another question to that I got sent from one of the moderators now.
And I'll just mention that this is a good time right now towards the end of the lesson. If you have general questions,
Yes.
definitely go ahead and ask them, and this is a good time to ask.
And if you're not sure what banner Tiffany's talking about, then go into, I mean, you've definitely seen it because you're in the website now, so I'm sure you've seen it. It doesn't appear when you're logged in, just when you're logged out. So I just want to add another question that I got sent from one of the moderators now, that came from the forum, which is relevant actually also to our lesson. A summary of the question basically is, one of the students there said, I paid tuition through the Pay What You Want model, and then I was thinking that I did an action in this world. So is that action, does that advance me to spirituality? And it connects to our lesson because we were talking about the fact that we can't make any changes to spirituality from this world. So can such an action affect the spiritual world as well? So that was a question, and also Tiffany's question was about why we chose that model. So there are two questions, and we'll already answer them together because they're on the same topic. So first of all, the reason why we chose that model, and we really did think about this a lot. Like we said last week, Asaf is volunteering, I'm volunteering, we have right now Adam volunteering.
It's Barak today.
Barak, sorry. We have Barak, who's also volunteering.
He's doing a great job, right,
yeah,
guys?
Barak
He's doing a great job. He's making
mixing,
sure
he's putting the things on the screen.
you're seeing the right thing at the same time.
Right. He's going to upload it to
At
the
the right
archive
time.
to make sure you can download it. Adam was here last week. We have Shane, Sarah.
These are names of people right now behind the scenes, making sure that your actions, that your questions are actually getting into the chat, that that the system's working.
And the reason why you're not even thinking about these people is because they're doing a good job, because they're making everything run smoothly. So all these people are volunteers, so that's good. But, there's a camera in front of us, actually two, because we have two cameras and a screen and a computer and an iPad and all these things here that do cost money. And we want to at least cover our costs. So from what we calculated, the price per student per semester is approximately $25. And we thought of charging $25 per student per the semester. Then we thought that it might be unfair. Why? Because some students from certain places in the world, for them $25 is a lot of money. And then that's not equality. It's not equality to give someone that would be equivalent to, say, charging what in America maybe $2,500 or $25,000, right? Because for some people, that amount is huge. So we decided to go for a different model that's more kind of in line with our idea of making the Wisdom of Kabbalah available to any person in the world that wants to study it. And we want to make sure that the finances are not an issue. So if a person cannot afford it, they can get it for free. So that's why we chose to go with the Pay What You Want model. So if you want to just cover your costs, then that's $25. If you want to help other people who maybe can't afford to cover their costs, then you can give more than that. If you want to give a monthly contribution to help during the semester and next semesters as well, then you'll find that option too. And it really is something that we really appreciate, because it enables us to stay with that model, that we don't have to kind of, close up the wisdom for a whole group of people for financial reasons. And this also connects to the question that was sent in the forum, which was connecting to the topic of the lesson, because a person, it's kind of a healthy ego. A person followed our tuition model and paid for the course. Let's assume they paid more than $25, because if they paid $25, they covered their costs. So that's pretty, simple. They paid for the electricity and for the cameras and so on. But let's say a person gave more than that. So the question is, it's not about the pay what you want model now, it's just about an action in this world. Can this influence spirituality? Because we just learned that we're in a world of causes, right? So let's say I want to think of students who are not financially able to pay for the course, and I'm thinking of them, and I want to feel good, and I want to do a good deed, and I want to help the light spread to the world, and I double it or whatever. It doesn't matter. So is there a spirit? Is that action advancement to spirituality? Because we said anything in this world we can't influence spirituality from this world. So the answer is, and this is just like we answered about the book actually, and we'll open it up a little more next lesson, but the answer is, it depends what your intention is. Now, if you do it with no intention whatsoever, other than saying, okay, I want to help someone else, then that intention already, what is it thinking of? Let's try and analyze it. You're thinking already of a collective soul, because you're not thinking of an old lady to help across the street. You're thinking of someone, and you're thinking of that person, making it available for them to start doing this. And this is really the only thing that needs to be done. This is the only thing that's creating any negativity, anything bad in this world that we see, is a result of a lack of this. So if you do an action, this is just an example, I'm just using this question because it relates to our lesson. So if you decide to cover a cost for a student that can't afford it, or if you decide to, respond to a question in the chat, or do any action in this world that you're thinking of another student, you're thinking of another person's spiritual advancement, then what's happening here is you're already rising to this level. Just like when reading a book. And this level influences you. So the intention dedicates on what level your action is. Your intention. So if you do that action or any other action with that intention, with the intention to reconstruct that collective soul, with that intention to reach the higher state, then that state, it influences you, it lifts you, it raises you. So I hope that clarifies not only the pay what you wish model, but it clarifies a much deeper concept, and that is, can actions in this world truly make a difference for spirituality? The answer is yes, depending on your intention. So we're reaching the end of the lesson, and
we have a few announcements.
We have a few announcements, and we're really happy for your activity in the lesson, for you being active and asking questions, and it really is great. And we can see that all the students almost sticked around for the entire lesson. So we're happy that you're kind of engaged and involved.
And we know that there are many people who are downloading the lessons because they can't watch them live sometimes. So you always have that option to do it, and you can do it even if you watch the lesson live and you just want to get back to it again.
Right. Just before I forget, we just spoke about the whole pay what you want model. Guys, this campaign is gonna end Saturday night. By the way, I forgot to mention that. So first of all, that annoying banner will disappear, and second of all, you only have a few days left. If you want to pay for the course, pay what you want. So that's just a heads up. Today is Friday.
Today is Friday.
It's Thursday night.
Thursday night.
For
Depending
America.
on where you see, it's all a matter of perception.
It's all a matter of perception. So today's Thursday night. Mm-hmm. So by Saturday night Eastern time, the campaign is going to end. So you only have a short time to participate in it. So go into edu.kabbalah.info. If you don't see the banner there for some reason, just log out of your account, refresh the page, and you'll see it up the top. All right, go on.
All right, so first of all, important to understand what's going on in this month. This month there's going to be a very special activity for Kabbalah students worldwide. There's a World Kabbalah Convention, and it happens in Israel. Mm-hmm. And by the way, thousands of people coming from around the world, thousands. It's amazing. We don't have time right now to explain how amazing it is. Maybe we'll talk about this in next lessons. But what you do have to know right now is that it takes place on February 21st through the 23rd. And by the way, it's in Tel Aviv here. And there will be no lessons between February 14 to 28th. From the 14th to the 28th, no lessons, okay?
Why? Because Asaf and Gilad and
your
and
teachers
Sarah
from
and
from
Dave
St. Louis
and William
exactly.
and Regan and Barak and everyone, they're all going to be here in Tel Aviv.
Exactly.
And by the way, you're welcome to join too.
Of course.
If you can make it to Israel,
if you're capable
it will be
of that,
incredible. But again, we're not going to get into that now.
Yeah, and we will tell you when there's going to be a convention in the U.S.
Right.
That's going to happen.
Which is not far from now.
That's going to happen in a while as well.
Yep.
In a short while. So we will also have events coming up in Chile, in Brazil, and Mexico during the week of April 26 to May 3, and of course then the North American Convention. That's on May 4 to 7 in Newark, New Jersey. So we'll talk about this more in next lessons. There's still time, but just, consider that. More information will be coming soon. As always, your next lesson is going to be on Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. If you have any technical questions, I saw some, by the way, related to stuff we were talking about at the end. So if you want to ask questions that are technical, not necessarily related to content, just go to, just email ec@kabbalah.info. Someone there will be happy to reply to your questions. And that's about it. Any unanswered questions in terms of content you can take to the forum. And maybe we will sign off with a clip. We have a video clip. I understand. I
was going to save it for next lesson, but all right, if you're ready.
Yeah? Or maybe we don't.
No, we have a clip. Let's watch it.
A person attains many intellectual things by the study of Kabbalah, but that doesn't have anything to do with attaining the roots. The attainment of the roots is called the attainment of the qualities of bestowal. It's not knowledge. It is the attainment of corrections, of qualities, new qualities. I have now 613 corporeal desires, and when I attain them in their spiritual form, meaning that they become 613 desires of bestowal, that means that I have attained my roots. I attain myself as a giver instead of myself as a receiver. That is called my roots. The upper world is what is painted or pictured within me through my corrected qualities. Roots are my qualities. It's just like now, what I see in this world. What does it mean that I see something? I feel myself here. That picture is inside of me, the picture of this world. The collection or the inner picture, the connection that I have between my qualities is what I call this world. I have many impressions and different connections in my inner schema, and I feel all of that, and that's what I call this world. When that schema within me will work according to bestowal at the minimal level with all its items, that will be the attainment of the roots. The connection between what I had before, when I felt this world, within my corporeal schema, when I was entirely connected in order to receive between my qualities, and the schema that is already connected according to the program of the stole, the connection between those two is called the language of the branches. What does that language give me? I begin to understand how the Creator created the levels, the steps, degrees of attainment. That's what I begin to recognize. Not what's happening on a certain level, on the surface, but what's between the levels. How the descent or ascent happened between the levels. Now, why do I need to know that? If I learn just one level, then I'm either inanimate or vegetative or animate on that level. If I study the difference between those levels, then I understand how I can change myself. Meaning, a language is the means to rise every time. It doesn't explain to us this language of the branches. It doesn't explain to us what's happening on the surface, like our language does. Where I know that this is a bear, and that's a house, and this is a car, and here's a table. No. The language of the branches explains to me the difference, the gap between this world and the spiritual world. The connection between the root and the branch, that's what it explains to me. It's not that I study the spiritual world per se. I mostly study both worlds, one against the other. And then I learn the Creator's action. Because what's important here is not the level itself, but what's between the levels. And this helps me realize how I can change myself and rise higher and higher.